Now, you talk about their friendship, and you've been with them since 1960s and onwards, witnessing their friendship, their relationship, and being among them personally, physically with them. Now, as you know, there's a biography of David Bohm that is written, a book that is published, and it mentions of a rupture, of a tension, of a breakup of the relationship between these two great men. What was your experience? How did you see it? Is there truth to this?
Well, the story I just told you took place in 1990. We were in Amsterdam in 1990. If there had been any rupture, there would certainly be discussion about it in what I just told you. The book that you're talking about refers to a rupture that took place before 1980. The writer of the book claims that by 1980, David Bohm had been decided that he had to step away from Krishnamurti, that what Krishnamurti was saying he no longer could go along with. And this is what the book says. And in fact, I believe it's in the paperback issue, that there are a number of letters that were written in January of 1980 by a gentleman I know, Fritz Wilhelm, who had been associated with Krishnamurti, and they're letters from David Bohm to Fritz that imply that I can't go along with what Krishnamurti is saying anymore. So these were used as proof. However, the date of those letters is January 1980, and there are just some letters. There's another letter that David wrote to Fritz, asking him please to destroy the letters because they would not be understood. And I can explain later why they would not be understood. However, the more important thing is that the writer of the biography said, this is proof. Well, as you know, and the reason that you and I met, there were a series of dialogues that took place between David and Krishnamurti that began in the 60s, went through the 70s. The third series began 3 months after this supposed rupture took place, and they became perhaps the most classic of the series, called The Ending of Time. And then after that, there were other dialogues. And then after Krishnamurti died, David Bohm did a series of seminars in Ojai on the nature of consciousness, where he, and this isn't really understood by many people, the continuity that began in the 60s went through the 70s and went through the 80s, and now David continued that continuity by finding a means, this brilliant man, finding a means by which what the two men had investigated during the dialogues could be represented in scientific terms. And it was done. So...
But Bill, there was a moment in time where there was a separation.
Absolutely.
What caused that? There must, I mean, well, we have expressions says if there's no fire, there's no smoke. What happened? There must have been certain things. There is some truth to it, but what was behind it? With David Bohm, I think he went through a troubled time.
Well, that's the point. And the biographer, Mr. Pete, this is David Pete's book, Infinite Potential, which was the biography. And by the way, I should mention that I was supposed to write the biography. However, after David died, I got a phone call from Cyril from England saying that the publishers had decided that the first biography should be written by a physicist. And that certainly made sense to me. However, when the book came out, I had certain misgivings about it, and this being one of them. So let me explain what happened. Pete does explain that David Bohm was plagued by depression from the time he was in his late 20s, I believe. which had been inherited DNA from his mother, who would ultimately be institutionalized. But these periods of depression would come upon him sometimes without any warning. However, they could also be triggered. And I mentioned the first series of dialogues took place in 1965, and then there was a 10-year break, and then there's this other extraordinary series in 1975, a series of 12 amazing discussions where, in fact, they go into the whole concept, the concepts of time and space. When they were completed, there was a member of the Krishnamurti group in England who had been with Krishnamurti since he had been discovered, and in fact had written his biographies, who decided that David was trying to usurp Krishnamurti's position as teacher. And how did she prove this? She went into the 12 dialogues and counted the number of words each of the two men had spoken during the 12 dialogues, and since David had spoken more words than Krishnamurti, this was proof that he wanted to usurp them. He was the teacher, and they would have none of that. So that prevented the publishing of the 12 dialogues. As brilliant as they were never published in their entirety. A couple were published later on. However, word got to David that this was done. And remember, this is a very quiet, humble man, but he's also, you know, he's a human being and a great scientist. And when he heard that, it did in fact trigger a depression. I should also mention the fact that, I know this for a fact because of things that happened with me, Krishnamurti did not get involved in publishing and anything of that nature. So he didn't even hear about this. No one ever mentioned it. David continued his relationship with the Brockwood School, and they would see each other and, you know, would speak. But there was this underlying tension on David Bohm's part because of what had happened. And there were students at Brockwood and friends at Brockwood of David that said, look what that man has done. And as a result, two camps were established, the David Bohm camp and the Krishnamurti camp. And to this day, those two camps still exist. So there was the rupture. Eventually, the word did get to Krishnamurti. 5 years later, he invited David to talk again. And I think I gave you the tape to listen to today. And if you listen to the unedited...
This is the ending of time.
This was, I will tell you, this is Krishnamurti inviting David to talk again. So you can hear the unedited version of the audio tape. You can hear Krishnamurti saying to David what he always says, what would you like to talk about? And David said, you asked me here. You could tell from his voice, you know, he was confused. What do I, you were asking me to. And Krishnamurti, yes. And there's this long pause. A very long pause. Let's say about a minute and a half, they're quiet. Krishnamurti was searching for the words that would allow them to get into a conversation that, yes, perhaps there were problems, but how do we approach the problem that exists, that's actually the problem that exists throughout mankind, this whole relationship problem. So Krishnamurti finally found the question, sir, do you think perhaps mankind took a wrong turn? Sir, in history, do you think mankind at one point took a wrong turn? And that led to the conversation which became the 15 conversations known as the ending of time.